who are these Aryans and from where did this theory of Aryan invasion come? So there are no Aryans. There are no Dravidians. These are fake categories. There are only Indians. India is the oldest population group in the entire world outside of Africa. Indians, our ancestors have lived on the subcontinent for 70, around 60 to between 65 and 70,000, 75,000 years. And it's a very ancient population, like I said, and there are no Aryans or Dravidians. It's a very diverse population group with still very uniform genetics. That's the paradox of India. So there are no Aryans, first of all. Now, where did this theory of Aryan invasion come from? That's a good question. So it all started. Okay, so it's not if it's better to look at the bigger picture when we talk about how did this theory of Aryan invasion come about. And to understand how this theory was constructed, we have to go back 1,000 years before the British came to India. So 1,000 years before today, India was, well, India had not yet fallen prey to the foreign Turkic and other invasions of India. India, 1,000 years ago, had its own universities, hundreds of universities, hundreds of wonderful libraries. And in these libraries, we had the records of thousands of years of our history. Now, these Turkic invaders came into India. They destroyed every single library. They destroyed every single university. They burned every library. They massacred every single scholar, every monk, every bhikshu, every guru. Everybody was massacred. All these teachers, students, everyone was massacred. We know what happened in Nalanda, but several tens of thousands of students were massacred in one day, beheaded. The university was destroyed, it was ruined. The library was burned, it burned for several months. So imagine how much knowledge we lost. We lost all the written records of our past. We lost the written records of thousands of years of our past. It is not just Nalanda, it is so many other libraries. Takshashila, Tilhara, Sharda Peeth, Vikramshila, Odantapuri, and so on and so forth. So we lost all the written records of our past. Then the Europeans came to India about 500 years before today. And when they came into India and they started taking over parts of the country, they said, you bloody Indians don't have any written history. You don't write history. You people just transmit it orally. You are barbaric, you're primitive, you're backward. So all of the history that you claim to have had, it's just a myth because there is no written record. So the British deemed all of India's oral history, which was left behind because our written history was gone. So that's why Indians were forced to pass it on orally, whatever they remembered. The British came to India and they said that all your oral history is mythology. And then they proceeded to write their own version of India's history. So that is the genesis of this entire problem. Now, when the Europeans came to India, they noticed striking similarities between the vocabulary of Sanskrit and the vocabulary of various European languages like Greek, Latin, etc. So this became a field of study. They called it the Indo-European languages. Sanskrit was clearly the oldest language they knew. So at that time, they were clearly of the opinion that it all came from India, it all came from Sanskrit. Then in the 19th century or 18th century onwards, thereabouts, the missionaries started pouring into India, European missionaries, Christian missionaries. And they wanted to convert the population of India to Christianity, but it did not work. Indians were very strong in their culture. They had a very strong belief and pride in their culture. It was not possible to induce Indians to convert. So then people like Max Muller, they started studying Sanskrit. And Max Muller, he came up with this new theory based on biblical genealogy of an invasion of people into India. He said that there were two Aryan races who lived somewhere in Eastern Europe or somewhere there. And there were two invasions, one into India and Iran, and the other one into Europe. And he said that the European Aryans were more civilized, more superior. And the Indian Iranian Aryans were slightly inferior, but they were still stronger than the natives, and that's why they were able to subjugate the Dravidians and take over the country. And then they imposed Hinduism and the caste system and all that. So this is an invention of Max Muller, and he said that this happened after 1500 AD because of biblical chronology, genealogy, all that. According to the Bible, the world began around 4,000 years ago, according to the Old Testament or something like that. I don't know what it is. I've never read it. But according to these Christian theories or Christian myths, the world began about 4,000 or so years ago, and therefore all chronology had to be after that. So Max Muller said that the Aryan invasion of India happened around 1500 BC, and that's what it was, right? So that was what Max Muller did. After that, there were more individuals who proceeded to put forth more theories. Let me show you. One of these individuals was a person called Herbert Hope Risley. Okay, this guy was an exponent of scientific racism. So he said that based on the size of the nose of Indians and all, there are two races in India. Uh, so he essentially sought to take what Max Muller had postulated and give it some scientific basis, scientific racist basis. So he said so this guy, Herbert Risley, he said there were two races in India, an Aryan race and a Dravidian race, based on the color of the skin and the shape of the nose and all of that. So he's one of the founders of the Aryan Dravidian myth. The second person who did this, the second individual who did this was a Christian missionary. His name was Bishop Robert Caldwell. He is the person who put forth the myth of the Dravidian language family. He said that Tamil and certain other southern Indian languages are a separate language family, and he gave this language family the Dravidian name. So these are Dravidian languages. He is the originator of this myth of the Dravidian languages. And so he is essentially, he was able to divide India in this manner, and he was able to convert some people to Christianity. He is called a scholar of the Tamil language. The Dravidian political parties owe a lot to this person. As you can see, there is a statue of this individual, Robert Caldwell, in Chennai, Marina Beach, Tamil Nadu. There is a church that this individual built somewhere in the south of India, and so on. So this individual, Robert Caldwell, is the father of the Dravidian movement, the Dravidian separatist movement. Individuals like that person, what's his name, Ramaswamy, Periyar, and all these DMK, AIDMK, all these political parties, their entire ideology and the justification for their brand of politics comes from this person. So these political parties are soft separatist political parties. They are Tamil supremacist and Dravidian supremacist political parties. They claim that they have been victimized for several thousand years, the people of South India, and therefore they need to rise up against the Brahminism and Hinduism and Aryanism and all that. So this person, Robert Caldwell, and the other guy, Robert Hope Risley, these are the racist individuals who created these artificial divides in India. That other individual, Robert Risley, actually he went further. He did one of the first censuses in India, and he categorized Indians into four categories, four artificial hard categories. And this is the beginning of the institutionalization of this British created caste system in India. India had a very much older and much more complicated a system called the Varna Jati system. There were so many different occupations, so many jatis, and these were all fluid. You could move from one jati and one Varna into another. But these people, on the basis of all these false theories, created the four divisions in Indian society, which are today set in stone because of the policies of the government of India after independence. So this is another piece of the puzzle about the Aryan invasion theory. And then all the Indian academics, the Indian education system, they started teaching all this as fact, and so on and so forth. This was continued, and this is essentially, in short, the birth of the Aryan invasion theory. This is how this theory was set in stone. And after independence, India's education system kept on teaching this because the great British masters had given us this great theory. So how can we disregard it? So it is still taught even today. And today we have this new neo-colonization of the 21st century. So you have all these Marxist historians whose objective is to wipe out Hinduism from India. And there are certain other people also, the M4 complex, Mullah, Marxist, missionary, and media. So they all propagate this theory, and because of that, because of the ubiquity of this theory everywhere, whether it's in the movies, whether it's in the social media, whether it is in the news, whether it's in the judiciary, the Indian academia, everywhere this theory is portrayed as the only valid theory, and therefore all Indians from their childhood grow up believing this, because this is what we are taught, this is what every person in a position of authority teaches us, and that's why this theory continues to be taught. Now, in the 20th century, they discovered that there is no evidence of an invasion. There is no massacre, there's no warfare, there's nothing. And there is no evidence of a migration also. And yet, so now they're trying to give it some genetic basis. They first changed it from invasion to migration. Soon it will become tourism. Eventually, it will become a picnic theory. But they will anyhow try to keep it alive. So that is the genesis and the history of the Aryan invasion migration theory.